This episode is brought to you by BigMooseCoffeeCompany.co.
Okay, we appear to be recording.
Yeah, we should probably stop talking about how we would rebrand ourselves as grime artists, shouldn't we?
What is your grime name?
I don't know. We didn't get to that.
No.
We established.
Kris.
Well, yeah, we established that there's a lot of Zs.
Big Krizzy.
Oh, I want that name so bad.
Oh no, your surname's King. We should have got him with that.
King Krizzy.
Yeah, King Krizzy.
Oh,
done.
Okay, from this point on, I am now. Okay.
Right, if anyone can come up with a grime name from the beginning point of William George Roberts, I'll send you one of my race hoodies in the post.
Billsy Bobberts. That sounds more like a Cockney.
He's too friendly, isn't he? Yeah. Billsy Bobberts.
Oh, it's our Billsy Bobberts.
It's me, Mary. Billsy Bobberts. It's all going to be pantomime characters. Have we started?
Yeah, pal. Oh, well.
This is what happens when we don't have a guest on a show. There's no structure. We just start talking.
Yeah, and we only started talking about grime because I had a Wiley song just randomly popped into my head.
There you go.
Yeah.
So we've covered grime.
Yeah. For you grime fans out there. For you running grime fans.
Oh, mate. If we could avoid the royalties, we would definitely have a different soundtrack on this show.
Yeah.
Yep. Everything Endurance. Theme tune by Stormzy. Well up for that.
Shut up.
If you happen to be listening, we want that theme tune.
Yeah. Anyway, should we actually provide some useful information?
Yeah, it seems like something we should do.
Hey up, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. We've had some belting guests over the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, if this is all sounding a bit loose and a bit frazzled, it's because we decided to lock ourselves in Chris's front room for a couple of days and record a whole load of episodes all at once. I am running almost entirely on coffee now.
Yep. And pepper on toast.
Yeah, but I had no idea. And feel free in the comments below or whatever to let us know if this is normal. But I had never come across that before. Just white toast, proper crappy white bread as well.
Yep.
With butter and just black pepper on it.
Yep. Ground
black pepper. Never come across it before. And I won't lie, I was sceptical. It was a delight.
Yep.
I've got close to the mic and done my Marks and Spencer's voice.
Yep.
Salted butter and black pepper.
Yep. So that's been our morning. Coffee and
black pepper.
New beginnings of the toast variety.
Kris, for the love of God, what is this episode about? I can feel people unsubscribing.
Well, hopefully they are subscribing in the millions because they're leaving us a review.
It's
been a while since we've reminded people to do that. Really appreciate you guys leaving us reviews. It's good for our egos, I suppose, in the short term, but long term, it helps us push up the rankings on things like iTunes, and it allows us to get better guests, so you're not having to listen to just me and Waffle talk. Me and Waffle? Me, that could be your grime name. Me and Will waffle about grime and weird stuff we put on toast.
So please leave us a review, but not necessarily of this episode.
Yeah. But yeah, we're going to do one just me and they, aren't we?
Yeah, we are.
On the back of, we get a lot of questions come in.
Yeah. We do. And obviously, people who are signing up for the races on the Beyond the Ultimate series, but people who I bump into while I'm out and about working around know who we are now and ask us questions, and I don't know the answers to them, Kris.
Yeah. They recognise your bald head and glasses, which is cool.
Yeah, I'm getting a lot of that.
Don't recognise me.
It's the Heston Blumenthal thing, though. They only recognise me as a bald man with bright glasses on. They don't know if it's me or Heston or Harry Hill.
Do you reckon they ask Heston about...
You will from that running
Roberts.
podcast. I would love that.
Yeah, that'll be the day we know we've got this podcast to...
So, Heston, if you're listening, with Grimesy, presumably.
Grimesy and Stormzy.
Grimesy?
Oh, we've both lost
God,
it.
It's over.
If Heston Blumenthal is listening alongside Stormzy, that's great. Hey up.
Hi. Unexpected pleasure. Come in, have a brew. Have some pepper on toast. Heston, you'll love this. Freeze it, smash it in a bits. Fantastic.
With headphones on so you can hear the screams.
God, that got darker than I was expecting. Look.
Okay. Back on track. There's going to be a lot of this, I think, in this episode.
We had too much coffee.
So yeah, some of the questions coming in are coaching related.
Yeah, and we know you, Kris, as a dog owner. So, before we were rudely interrupted, we know you as, King Krizzy, grime overlord, and race director. That's the guys you've been in for the last few years. But prior to this, you were a coach.
Yeah, tried to be.
Yeah, you're quite good at it, as I remember.
Yeah,
it's something we haven't really touched on before in these podcasts.
Yeah, I was a coach before in RD. I predominantly a strength coach, but because I also ran a lot and started doing the whole ultra running thing, it was quite cool to actually blend both things. So I was a running coach and a strength coach, and at the time there wasn't many of me. There was running coaches and there were strength coaches, and as a result of that, when personal trainers were starting to get clients that were ultra runners, it was becoming more common, they'd reach out to me. And when runners were wanting to improve their strength work, they would reach out to me. So I was in this nice little world for a few years, and I'd help a lot of coaching courses write their material and their syllabus so personal trainers could become personal trainers. And yeah, it was a good couple of years. And then just walked into a random running shop one day and boom.
You were a race director.
I'm an RD.
Yeah. Usually they only sell shoes and stuff, but
yeah,
race series, have that.
That turned out to be a good day.
Yeah.
So for those that don't know, I got this job by just walking into a running shop, and the owners of the Beyond the Ultimate at the time were looking for an RD. I'd never RD'd before. I had my own gym. I was quite happy, but thought, well, I'll have a go at that. And then 4 weeks later, I'm in the Amazon.
A baptism of fire.
Yeah, 5 years after that, I'm the owner. Yeah,
it's not worked out too badly at all.
It's worked out okay. But yeah, I do miss the coaching thing. It's a lot of time that you have to invest into your clients, and I didn't have a lot of time, so I kind of thought, if I can't do my clients justice, I'll step back and make room. So I do a lot of mentorship for some, athletes at the top end now, but it's not really coaching, more just having input in their program and putting them in the way of the right person to train them. But yeah, I've helped out a few world record holders and loads of people. So yeah, I can put my coaching hat on today. Be a bit professional on that.
It looks a lot like your sweat stain for a Rangers hat.
Shut up.
No.
Now I've got long hair, this hat is basically part of my skull. But yeah, so we're going to do some coaching tips on how to write your own program.
Yeah, and this kind of runs alongside, there's a seminar that you did that's one of our earliest videos on YouTube.
Yeah, I look back at it now and think I could have done a better job.
And here we are.
Yeah, so here's my opportunity to get some retribution, if that would be the right word. But no, I did that presentation purely because I'd done one the week before for another organisation, and I just thought I'll just get a bit of that info, kick it through, and it'll be useful for our runners. I never ended up doing the part 2, so hopefully we can do maybe 2-3 part series of this coaching thing. So anyone that's new to ultra running or anyone that's took on our races can start here. Hi, well done. You make a good decision. And use these tips to kind of build up their base fitness and get ready for any race.
So to all you people that we were talking about earlier that have asked us, where do I start? I've signed up for this thing. Now what the hell do I do? That's what we're here for today.
Yeah, we're going to help you, hopefully. And if not, that'll be sad. So I think the one thing to start with is the considerations for writing a program. Doesn't sound overly sexy, but one thing that we've spoken a lot about on these podcast episodes when we have these guests are that they have coaches. So even the coaches have coaches. So Jasmine Paris, Damian Hall, Ian Sharman. I imagine Ian Sharman has a coach. So when you get to that top end of the spectrum and you're looking at running professionally, it's always good to just have that extra bit. But there's a lot of things you can do to build to that point. And I think if you look at getting a coach too early, you could be paying a man or a woman a fair amount of money to do stuff that you could probably just do with a bit of research and a bit of help.
Yeah, absolutely. I know when I signed up for the Ice Ultra and you were going to coach me through that, I'd have been completely overwhelmed without you there to help me structure that. But the first part of the process was you having to teach me a lot of stuff that if I'd have come in forearmed with, we could have sort of jumped straight into the meat of it, as it were.
Yeah, exactly. So there'll be three types of people that are listening to this. There'll be your elite athlete, and they'll be listening to this, and hopefully this should be an exercise for you of already do that, tick, already do that, tick. Oh, and you might get the odd one of like, oh, that's quite a cool consideration, I'll do that. But you've probably already surpassed this and you're now with a coach that's digging into the finer detail. Crack on. Hopefully we're going to do an episode in the future where I can have some input on that. The second band of people were people that have been ultra running for a while. Maybe they've just kind of pattered along and just done their own thing and just want to take it a bit more seriously now and start structuring their own program and stuff like that. And then there's the beginner. There's the person that's new into this, that's looking at, the masses of information, who just want a bit of clarity.
Yeah. Oh God, I've just signed up for a big stupid.
Yeah.
Now where do I go?
Yeah. So we've done a lot of episodes where we've tried to draw out that information from guests, and you look at our top 10 tips for like the Jungle Ultra. It's all about consistency and all those kind of things. But I hopefully today we'll give some practical advice so people can put pen to paper and start actually designing their own program. So the first step you have to do is you have to look at the considerations that are needed to write a program. And what I mean by that is looking at you as an individual or your life and stuff, because there's no cut and copy program. I absolutely hate it when you see these things of like, learn to run in 12 weeks, or this is a perfect template for training for the Marathon des Sables or something like that, because it doesn't exist. There are crossover things, but if you're doing a bulk program that everyone else is doing, it's not going to be the best program for you. So you have to factor in some individual considerations for that. For example, one is experience. Okay, so experience comes from lots of running, doing some races, building up to the race in which you are planning to do. So if you've joined up for our race and you've not done any ultras yet, we suggest you do some ultras.
Probably a good idea.
You will know they provide valuable experiences. It's good for your confidence, and it's good to make the mistakes in a place that isn't the Arctic Circle or the jungle and stuff like that.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
But when you're writing a program, your experience will, if you've raced before and if you're in that second category of people I spoke about, is going to be wildly different to someone's program who is new into running. Okay, because there's so many of the basics you have to pick up on the first run and the first couple of weeks of running, like the rest time and things like that. Okay, so experience is one variable, and hopefully by listing all these out, I'm going to show you that there is no copy and paste program. So experience is one. Second one is the type of event. So we already had mentioned as well from Jasmine Paris that she likes mountain races, trail races, not a road runner. You have very experienced road runners, sub 18 5K runners, sub 3, sub 2.5 marathon runners. Racing on a trail is completely different.
Yeah.
You think at the top end marathon time, there is some transitional skills and they'll probably be fast on the trails, but you start sticking lumps into things and technical trails, It's a huge difference, not only in the muscle recruitment of you running, but just in the effort level that's going to be required. Same as if you pluck someone from the mountains and stick them on a road race. You know, you look at Tom Evans as an example at the minute. Good trail runner, can also run cross country, not bad on the road at all. He's pretty nippy. Damien Hall, probably one of the fastest on rugged technical terrain. Stick him on a road marathon, that difference between him and Tom Evans will probably grow quite considerably because Tom's got more experience of road running and things.
Yeah.
So type of event, really, really important when you're looking at setting a program. It has to replicate. This sounds very basic, but you'll be surprised that because you're limited by the area in which you live. You know, the reason why people in the Peak District tend to prefer mountain running
is that's where they've done their training.
Exactly. Yeah. So your location based. So if you've picked a mountainous race or a trail race and you are living in a flat in inner city London, you're going to have to factor into your program travel time. You're going to have to do some stuff in central London, but you're going to have to factor in that your weekends are going to be probably spent down in Surrey or somewhere that you can get out on the trails. Complete or compete massively affects the way that your program is going to be structured. If you're looking at just getting to the finish line compared to winning, your training is going to be considerably different, because things like time on feet and stuff are going to be really important for your competitors. You're going to end up doing a lot of high intensity training and stuff for compete rather than complete. I'd argue you'd be doing both anyway, but you'd need to mix the ratio of that up dependent on what you're doing. Your current state. So when you started your journey into running, wasn't in the best shape, if you don't mind me saying.
No, I quite understand. I'm not a runner. I don't come from a sporty background, so yeah, I had a big step to take. Yeah,
so 99% of the people that will start this kind of journey will make mistakes by doing too much too soon. Thinking that, you know, I'll just start running, it gets addictive, you start seeing the signs improve, and all the, you know, your speeds and everything's getting easier, and whack, ankle injury, knee injury, whatever. And you should be going off a 10% ratio, so not increasing your mileage or your time by more than 10% a week, and that just puts the brakes on. That is a bit boring because you want to go out, once you've got that bug, you want to go, but that goes in the same with like weight programs and stuff like that and stuff you do at the gym. 10%. If you've been in shape previously and then you've had a long time off, you are starting from the beginning, I'm afraid, and building it up slowly. So that will probably coincide with your experience. Strength, diet, mobility, base, gait, cadence, all considerations as well. So now we're really getting into the details of why you can't do the program your mate Dave did to knock 20 minutes off his half marathon.
Yep.
Because your strength's going to be different. Your day-to-day diet will probably be different.
Dave's got weirdly long legs.
Dave has weirdly long legs in this story. Maybe he can also touch his toes where you can't touch your knees.
Yeah, he's limber Dave.
Yeah, your base level of fitness. We heard on another episode, Ian Keith did his first marathon sub 3.
Yeah.
Didn't pick up on that at the time.
No, should have mentioned it.
You know, I'd be happy with a sub 3 road marathon now. You know, like, so there are people that have a base level of fitness from other sports. We spoke to Paul Tierney. He did all his Irish, I can't even remember that, Gaelic football or shinty or whatever they called it, where they just beat the crap out of each other with sticks.
Hurling?
Yeah, hurling maybe.
Sorry, Paul.
And then on top of that as well, you've got the player or pusher argument. So this was an interesting thing that I went to actually in Leeds, where I live now. And it defines people as either a piano player or piano pusher. So a piano player typically would be someone that likes intricacy, likes to look at a really detailed program, go through it, show small signs of improvement. They'll probably write down their weights that they do after every rep in the gym and how they felt about it. They'll probably build a Google sheet on the weather and the humidity of the day. That's your piano player. Then you've also got your piano pusher, who's the guy that just, if you say, let's run 100 meters, has to be the first there and has to be bleeding by the time they get back, right? Right. So there's two types of people. And even though you could be a bit of both, you will know from listening to this if you're a player or a pusher. All right. So most pushers tend to go towards things like CrossFit, right? CrossFit is perfect for the pusher. Loads of reps, every single session you're stupidly sweaty. You've had that workout. Where players might not necessarily like that, but as long as they've got structured, detailed programming that it makes them improve, then they're golden, right? So the best athletes are both. But you may be leaning more to one side. So a program that is designed for a pusher where you go out running and you're blitzing yourself every time isn't going to be the best for you. Similarly, if you're a pusher and a program is really intricate and delicately bringing you up so you're not feeling like you're having a workout, that program is probably useless to you. All right? So we're going through quite a lot of things now. So if you see a template for a running program for an ultramarathon, you should go, bollocks. This person's trying to take my money. Go away. Another final thing as well is body composition. All right. So, and when we talk about these considerations, we're going to also mention how you would structure programs for this and how it would relate. Body composition, huge. All right. I haven't said weight. So body composition, meaning not what your overall weight is, but what you're made up of. How much fat you're carrying, basically. How big's that beer gut? All those kind of things. Plays a massive part, and something that you can improve quickly if it's not, let's say, optimal. All right. Carrying a bit of timber, you can work on shifting that within this program as a first goal, because everything is going to get easier. It doesn't take a scientist or an experienced coach to say, the less body fat you carry, the better you will be at running.
100%. The less injury prone you will be.
Yeah. And anyone that's listened to this that, like I think both of us, has been in and out of their training over the years, that day that you come back to start your running and you're carrying that extra stone or that extra, 24 pounds or whatever you're carrying now, feels wildly different.
Yeah.
Anyone in the stage racing world that races with a backpack will know the difference between a 6 kilo backpack and a 10 kilo backpack. It's why so many people spend their time cutting it. But one of the things that drives me crazy is you'll get people cutting their toothbrushes in half, and they'll be siphoning out their toothpaste and buying and paying an extra 50 quid for a mug that's a gram lighter, yet they're carrying an extra 6 pounds of body fat that they could have probably lost if they just cut the wine and beer out every weekend before. Yeah. So body composition is important. I never understood that in F1 as well. Why did Nigel Mansell have that mustache?
That must have been what, 2-3 grams of hair there?
Yeah, I mean, but
the drag.
They pay millions to cut 2 grams off of a wing mirror. Do you think they ever just went, Nigel, mate, come on?
Yeah, I mean, how many fingers does he actually need to work a flappy paddle gearbox?
Nigel, have you been to the toilet before you sat in that car?
No, Nigel, no pants. We've told you about this.
So if you're looking at doing these races and things like that, that also needs to be in your head. You can absolutely, it doesn't have to be a primary focus, but if your body composition isn't on fleek, as the young kids will say, we could tighten up on our diet. We'll do another episode on food. We'll worry about weight loss and food in a completely different episode, because that could be...
That's a whole thing.
Oh, you're going to hear me rant on that one. That's where we get going. Then, as you're writing your own program, you have to also have your coaching cap on, like me. So there's things like training methods. So many different methods you can choose from. So yes, there are so many templates in which you could pick, but they're normally based around a method. Is it going to be heart rate training? Is it going to be 80-20? Is it going to polarize? Is it going to be slow and steady only? Is it going to be HIIT? Is it going to be... There's so many you can do. And the answer is there are no ultimate methods. Ideally, it's a mixture of the two, and whatever works for you the best. That's why personally I prefer an 80-20 method, which is called polarize, because 80% of the time you're being a piano player, reducing the risk of your injury and just delicately improving your physique and your performance, and 20% of the time you're being the pusher. So if you're a nice mix of the two mentally, that works well for you. Get a bit of bit of variance.
I found that when you put my plan together.
Yeah, and pushers struggle with it a little bit because there's a lot more slow, steady running. But I think on the whole, if you're a pusher, you're not massively into your longer distance ultra running. You're naturally going to go towards your 5Ks, your 10Ks, if you are a runner, because a 5K is hell on earth if you're racing.
Yeah.
A 10K seems, to me, a 20K is the worst distance because it's enough that you can perform at a really high speed and effort level, but for just a bit too long of time. The other thing is testing. So we've got training methods and we've got testing, and this isn't something a lot of people will do, but it's really important as a coach when you're coaching someone, but really important for you, especially if you haven't got a coach, is to test yourself. And I don't mean just going out and testing yourself physically. I mean having a baseline of showing that your fitness is improving, especially if you're not heart rate training or you're not into that kind of stuff because it bores you. You need something within your program that you can do 1 week and then you can do it again 6 weeks later, replicate the conditions to near perfect and see if you've improved. So examples, if you're new to running, what a lot of people will do is typically do this like what their 5K, 10K, 8K PB is. You know, what's their fastest mile that they've run? What's the fastest half marathon they've run? It's a very good way, especially with Strava now and watches. It's a really easy and quick way to test yourself. You know, do a 5K, 6 weeks later, pencil it in your calendar. That's my 5K date. You spend 6 weeks trying to improve to make your 5K time faster. It's a pretty straightforward test.
And quick wins as well.
Yeah, exactly. And it gives you a short-term goal and focus. If you're looking at doing longer distance stuff, you might have a loop around your weight that you do regularly that has the same amount of vert and all that. It's just so I think for you, it was the Edale Skyline, right? Regular route for you. You go out 6 weeks later, you pencil a date. The only thing with doing it outside is and in that kind of thing, you've got to rely on weather conditions. But if you do that once a month even, and your time is progressively going down or effort level is stabilizing or reducing as well for the same time, that's ultimately a result. Which is important to remember in ultra running. It's not about actually getting your time down. It's about getting the same distance with the effort level reducing.
Yeah. That's
big difference.
Yeah, big difference.
So we'll talk about that again in a second. So we've got the testing, the data collection for that testing. So Strava's perfect for that. Yep. You know, you've got a base to record that. But if you're going in the gym, you might want to make it gym related. A very simple strength thing that I used to do with beginners was how many push-ups they could do in a minute, how many good form squats they could do in a minute, how many pull-ups they could do in a minute, and how many burpees. That's like a fitnessy kind of base to start off with. And then you time it, 30-second rest between each minute, and you write your reps, and 3 weeks or 4 weeks later, you try and beat it. As you start to advance, you start getting into how many body weight squats can you do in a minute, how many body weight deadlifts can you do in a minute, how many body weight bench lifts can you do in a minute, and how many pull-ups can you do in a minute. And then you have a collective score. A very simple, very basic way of testing improvement. And as your body weight goes down, you have to lift less. So that also works because if I've said that and you're like, well, I can't bench my body weight. Well, your first target then is to get to a position where you can bench your body weight. You know, so that is a way of building up to testing at that level. Your support is going to be key. What level of support you've got at home. We spoke to Jasmine Paris. She's obviously got a supportive husband, partner, because she was getting up at 5 o'clock. There would have to have been some sharing of jobs of babysitting and stuff like that. Session time, frequency, rest time, all come into play when doing these programs. So I hope in the last 10 minutes, I've basically proven that you should never use a templated program. All right? Okay.
I'm with you. I'm already out. I'm never going to use a templated program.
Because it sends me crazy. Okay, so let's start now practically writing our program up. What do we do first, do you reckon? What's the first thing we do?
I've got a pen and paper.
Yeah.
Is that the first thing?
Yeah, that's probably quite good. One of the things that we have to do is look at what we need to improve. All right. So I just said a minute ago, we need to basically have the same performance, but requiring less energy. Right. So heart rate training, for example, everyone gets their zones. You can use a 3-zone, 5-zone, whatever model to do that. You run for 10K and it takes you an hour in your heart rate one, which might be 140 to 150.
For anyone that doesn't maybe know what that means at this point, I didn't when you first introduced it to me. What kind of testing are you talking about there, and where could I go?
So we cover that in an episode with Alan Ruddock.
Yes, we do.
So you can go back and listen to the episodes with Alan Ruddock. You can get a whole load of lactate testing stuff done to get your heart rate zones. But very simple. If you don't even want to do your testing, you can get a heart rate monitor for dirt cheap now.
Oh, yeah.
And you can sync it with your phone. I think a heart rate monitor I saw the other day for 25 quid.
Yeah.
Polar one. So you can get a heart rate monitor and you can get a watch or a phone that syncs with it to record it and go out for an hour's run, right? You want to be at the effort level where you can breathe easily. You could have a natter to your mate if that exists. Yeah. If you're earlier in your running to do even that, that's what you want to be aiming to do, is go out for a 10K and it be a minimal effort. But if you get to the end of the 10K and it takes you an hour, and your heart rate in that time has been 145 as an average, and you do it 6 weeks later, and you may do it in an hour again, but your heart rate has been 140, 135, you have adapted. Your adaptations have happened to make you a better long distance runner. Okay. Yeah. And what specifically happens there, if we're looking at getting into the science, is called eccentric hypertrophy. Left ventricle eccentric hypertrophy. Yeah.
Good words. I have a lot of syllables.
So there's two types of hypertrophy you can get. You can get eccentric and concentric. Concentric tends to be sprinters. It's where the muscle walls gets thick. And what that happens to do is it gives you a bigger push, like a big hit, which sends blood through the body. Great for sprinters who are static 1 minute, gone the other. Right. Eccentric, the chamber actually gets bigger. It holds more blood, and then it pushes out. More blood goes around, more oxygen goes around. Lovely. Okay, but that's also why we stopped doing the ECGs on our medical testing, because it's also quite common for endurance athletes to have things like heart murmurs and irregular heart patterns because their heart's grow and blood pressure drops. So it looks weird to regular doctors because they're not seeing that. But also left ventricle hypertrophy happens, and this weird chamber of your heart gets freakishly bigger compared to the rest. It's a muscle at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So loads of things happen when you start to train like this and train gently, and you get a bigger capillary network over your muscles, which means that blood can spread. Oxygen gets to your muscles easier, so you have more function from your muscles. And you also, I don't want to say that it decreases your lactate in your muscles, but you gain a higher threshold. If I say that lactate reduces, I think Alan Ruddock will probably feel his ears burning, get in his car,
swoop in through this window,
shoot through the window and shoo me in, because it's not necessarily the case. Lactate is our friend. So
again, go back to the Alan Ruddock episode. There's loads of detail about this.
Yeah. And so what we're looking at doing is ultimately in our program having the same effort level but getting further. Okay, so your heart rate drops, same effort level, and you get further. So you've required less energy to do the same thing, which if you think is incredibly advantageous when you're trying to run for 12, 15, 16, 17 hours. If you're requiring less energy to do that than your competitors, chances are you're going to do pretty well. Okay. And that comes down to a level of aerobic training. So if we are going off for you can go off a 3 or 5 zone model for heart rate training. Typically that tends to be between 140 and 150 BPM. Once again, you can go find that out and nail that on if you want to get it exactly. But if you don't want to do the heart rate training, it's ensuring that you're running, stroke walking, if you're doing hills and stuff, your heart rate isn't pounding out your chest, and you can sing a song. It's a good test. So what's the song that's been in our head today?
Time After Time.
Time After Time. You know that's by? Is it Cyndi Lauper?
Cyndi Lauper, that sounds right. What was it the band Cyndi Lauper was in? Again, comment on Twitter.
Answer on a postcard. So that has been in our song ahead, in our heads all morning. So if you can run and sing time after time without being, you're probably in your heart rate, right, of what will produce this adaptation or the adaptations that we require.
I'd expect royalties from Cyndi Lauper now. If downloads of that song go up as a consequence of this.
It's a banger though, isn't it?
Yeah, it's an absolute
banger. The second zone that we can be in is anaerobic, and that is where you're breathing heavily, and we start to go down this line of slightly different adaptations, but they are still massively advantageous to us as ultra runners, and they don't get utilized enough. So this is, if we're going to go into the polarized method of training, this 80-20 rule, 80% of our time needs to be spent in aerobic training and 20% needs to be in this anaerobic capacity. Now, see if you can remember from our programming, what is the biggest mistake people make when trying to train in this category?
In what? In the anaerobic?
Yeah. What's the biggest mistake?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know what you're going to say.
It'll be familiar when I say it, is they don't do it as intensely enough as they need to. Remember me saying about the grey zone? Yeah. So this grey zone sits in between the 80-20 mark. So if you imagine a line left to right, left is aerobic, 140 below, 150 beats below, 150, 160, 170, we have this kind of grey area, which adaptations will happen if you sit there long enough. And then you start going into the 170s, 180s, 190s, and we're starting to get closer to this red zone, which is a nice buzzword. And in most adaptations happen in this green area on the left, the aerobic area, and the red area on the right, which is the anaerobic area. Most people, especially at running clubs, fall into this grey area. Yeah. So they will be adapting, they will be getting better, but they're wasting a lot of time and spending a lot of time doing stuff which could be used more efficiently.
There's a huge temptation to sit in that area as well. If you're just getting into doing this level of training, if you're not working very hard, you feel like you're not working very hard. Yeah. And you don't necessarily feel like you are making progress. Equally, you're not going to want to be blowing out your ass for the entirety of every run that you do. So you end up sitting in that unhappy medium place.
Yeah. And the reason why running clubs are so good at sitting in this grey area is because they'll say we're doing a sprint session or a speed session, and that will often be a pyramid set of 400 meters times 8 and they'll use things like threshold pace or race pace or something like that. Now these are great. That grey zone is great when you're getting ready to race, because that is probably the area in which you're going to perform in. And if you've done all of your time in green and bits of your time in red and none in between, your race pace hasn't been defined or practiced. So if we use an example, a half marathon, you've been in the green zone in your training, right? That's probably been about 10 kilometers an hour, right? So what's that in minute miles? Like 8 minute miles?
Something like that. If you
let's just say 10 kilometers an hour, mid 8 minute miles, just for easy maths. Yeah. Either or, it doesn't matter. Then you're doing these sprint sessions in the red zone, which are 100 meter sprints times 6 with a 4 or 5 minute rest in between each one. I'll come back to the rest time on this in a second.
All right.
Then you do a half marathon. You haven't practiced your race pace, so you kind of go out the block and drop, or you start off too slow. And that's a common mistake people make when they don't go through running clubs, because they've not practiced at their race pace. So this grey zone training should only really come in the final 4 weeks, 5 weeks to a big race. Anything half marathon and below, you will probably function in this grey area, because it's anything below 5k. Actually, you could probably tip into this red bit, but there's only so long that you can hold that for before you crumble.
Yeah.
So the idea is to make your green zone quicker. So your grey zone is more comfortable when you race, and your red zone, your performance is higher. You're getting more out of it for that ridiculous heart rate, because your aim isn't to take your heart rate to 220 or 250, because one, it's near impossible, and two, you'll probably die.
Yeah, but you're going to need someone on hand with a defib.
But if you can get your heart rate to 180, 190, ideally, 190 if you're I will put a health warning in here. If you've got heart complaints and stuff, seek help from a doctor or trainer first. Yeah. But the red zone stuff, if you can get it to 190 and stuff like that, your performance should go up. You should be able to run further, run harder, run faster for that effort level. But the good thing about that is consistently you're always aiming for the same kind of heart rate, because as you get fitter, you can still push to that.
Yeah.
So a lot of people make the mistake of going into this grey zone. All right. So aerobic, lovely and slow, 80% of your time. Anaerobic, red zone, 20% of your time. Grey zone, specifically when you're training for an event and getting close to it. Right?
That's straightforward.
Yeah. So we kind of go through the considerations at the beginning. We've got a rough template to our program now. Now we have to define what these bits are. Now, green zone, dead easy. Nice steady runs, nice steady walks. Lower the better in some cases. So you don't have to be in 140, 150 the whole time you go out for a run. You can be lower. You know, like a lot of these guys that are doing the spine race that are winning have come from a walking background. And the reason why is they're going out for 5-6 hours in the hills with backpacks. Their heart rate will probably be 120, 130.
I have to say the first sort of couple of 3 months of the training I did for the Ice Ultra was that. I worked it into my daily commute. Yep. Stuck a load of weights in my bag and hiked to work.
What happens in that time though? How much weight did you lose?
Yeah, a ton.
Yeah. So when you started running, felt a hell of a lot easier, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
When I first started, I did exactly what you talked about, the classic. You go in, you think, I should be pushing harder. You end up in the grey zone and you end up injured straight away because you're carrying a bit of timber you don't necessarily need, and your muscles have no idea what you're trying to make them do right now.
Yep.
And it is too much, and little niggles start piling up, and that's where I very quickly found myself. Actually, I lost a lot of weight very quickly in the sort of 130, 140 heart rate zone, walking mostly, hiking with purpose, with a little weight in my bag, and then starting to work up to putting a little bit of a run into that distance here and there.
Yep.
Keeping the heart rate around the same pace, and before you know it, your weight's going down and you're actually jogging most of that route to work at the same heart rate level.
Yeah.
And that's where you see your results. It took a while for me to realize that, but actually that gives you something to follow.
Yeah.
You're retesting yourself every day.
And I think personally for me that one of the best moments of one of the most exciting times of my training was when I was getting ready for Kili. So I was training at the time to be one of the fastest people to run up Kilimanjaro. So you imagine what my training was. It was lots of hills, lots of sprints and stuff like that, matched in with long day sessions out in the hills and stuff. My testing was as simple as there was a really flat 20k trail, the Pennine Trail, that went from Dunford Bridge to near enough mid Sheffield. So just on there. And it was perfectly flat. Terrain was always great because it was tarmacked or pebbled and stuff like that. So it was a great way of me just running for 20k on a completely flat. It was wind protected because there was trees either side. And when I first started training, my average pace was 13 kilometers an hour with an average heart rate of 150. That was my zone 1 was 148 to 158. And in that zone, comfortable zone, 13 kilometers an hour. Prior to Kili, I'd done no flat running, nothing like that. That was about 4 months after that point. I was in the same heart rate, but at 16 kilometers an hour.
Yeah.
So for the same effort level, I'm now 3 kilometers faster. When that transitions into our race, particularly for multi-stage, you're out less. You're using less calories. Your recovery time improves for the same effort level.
Absolutely.
So
you're
that's
now less exposed to the elements for less time, and you're going to get the best bed at the end of the day.
Exactly. And it was frustrating at times because you have to stick true to this whole slow and steady thing, and you have to be patient. But when that moment happens and you do that and you think, bloody hell. And I can remember setting off thinking, this feels really quick, and checking my heart rate because I couldn't believe I never ran that fast before. Like that was never... I've run that fast, but it never felt like that. And I'm just cruising along, just expecting my heart rate to go up, and it didn't. And, you know, on reflection, I moved from 82 kilo to 73 kilo. I was a hell of a lot lighter. I'd done some really intense training and then had a decent amount of rest I had 3 days rest before I started the first test, and I had 3 days rest before I did the second test. It was the consistency again to make sure the data collected was accurate, but in a very simple way. Yeah. It doesn't have to be a 20k, it could be a 10, 5k or whatever, but for what I want to do, I knew hour and a half blocks were important. So that's what I did. And it's a really exciting time, and that comes from sitting in those aerobic zones. Anaerobically, I think you were surprised at how short those sessions were.
Yeah, I'd get to the gym and I'd be on my way out of the gym 20 minutes later.
Yeah.
But there was no doubt in my mind at the end of any of those sessions that they were the hardest sessions I'd done in the week.
Yeah.
I couldn't have stayed any longer.
If you get an anaerobic session right, you will feel, I think we both get it, and I think quite a lot of people, it's like that kind of raspy cough.
Yeah.
When you've kind of been pushing. And it's quite hard to motivate yourself to do that. You sometimes need a mate or some particular focus or a structure to that. A decent coach will be able to structure those sessions so you can see.
I listen to a lot of 80s thrash.
Yeah, so it is pretty much music on, head down and go. I tend to do my red zone stuff in a gym, just because if I'm outside my house doing sprints on my road, after 3, I'll just want to come in. So you kind of commit to a certain thing. And I also like doing it on machinery because you get an instant feedback of power output, or if you're on a watt bike, you get that power output score. If you're on a treadmill, you get that speed or the calories burnt or whatever. You've got something to look at to say, my performance is this. So I recently did a session on a ski erg. Been on one of them?
No.
It's like a rower stood up. It's the same kind of machine, but you have 2 handles and it replicates like a cross-country skiing movement. Completely new movement, but you look at the power output that you have in the 30 seconds and you want to beat it in the next rep. So your sprints, your anaerobic stuff, your sprint should be no longer than 30 seconds, ideally closer to 15, with big rests in between, typically. So, and it always surprises people when I say a 30-second sprint with a 3-minute rest. Because the idea is not to leave there completely worn out in the way that you would do it aerobically, but it's to make sure you maximize the 30 seconds. And that's why people don't get their heart rate up high enough. So we did yours on a spin bike, didn't we? And you hated it.
We started on spin bike and then we moved on to the rower.
Yeah. So the spin bike is good because there's no impact when you're sprinting. It's quite good to just go all out. You get that instant power or wattage feedback to say, right, I need to make sure that I at least beat this. But ultimately, it's not even that. It's I need to, in this 15 seconds, take that as high as I can. And what happens is your heart rate just shoots up.
You'll know if you've done it right. If there's any doubt in your mind that you could have worked harder in that 30 seconds, then you didn't work hard enough in that 30 seconds. Yeah. It's got to be 30 seconds where you couldn't possibly do more at the end of it. And then, all of a sudden, that 30 seconds is going to seem like a long time when you're watching that timer go down.
And if you think about like a typical running club, they might even do 8 times 200 meters with a minute rest, or you might do 200 meters fast, 200 meters slow recovery. Grey zone, all over it. Grey zone there. If you do 200 meters, or just even tuck that in to about 150 meters, because if you assume that 13 seconds is a 100 meter time on average, you're going to probably do over 30 seconds for 200 meter. So you tuck that into about 150, 100 meters level, and you don't pace yourself for the other reps, and you say every single rep is going to be my fastest rep. I'm going to go all out for 150 meters and get to that finish line and then have a good 3-minute recovery. I'll walk around gently, my heart rate will come back to normal. Boom, there you go again. If you do that and do it right, you'll be more exhausted than if you did 16 reps the other way around. Okay, those other mileages that you were doing on the 200 with 200 cool down or 200 with 200 are great if you're preparing for a race, because you'll be in that grey zone like you're probably going to be. Last 4 weeks of training, 5 weeks of training, great. Rest of the year round, get hitting those shorter sprints. And it could be as simple, and I don't say this lightly, as 6 of those sprints at 100 meters, 150 meters with a 3-minute rest, done. It sounds mad, but it can be as simple as that. So your session is less than a kilometre of running, but every single step of that kilometre is you at absolute all-out beast mode.
Tell you what, we mentioned Anaerobic earlier. It's worth looking at some of the what's he called?
Red Zone Running.
Red Zone Running. Yeah.
So that was what I was going to point. Al and his team have actually created a whole Instagram page called Red Zone Running.
Siri thought you were talking to. Oh wow.
Al is listening.
Al.
So Al has got Red Zone Running on Instagram that's got a whole list of scientifically backed red zone type of training sessions you can do.
And they might not be something you want to jump into straight away, but they'll give you an idea of these structures we're talking about here. They're not big numbers, they're not long periods of time.
They've also got a beginner version. So they've got advanced and beginner version, so you can pick speeds on treadmills and stuff. And most of these sessions he's designed to use a treadmill. But that is a great... I wouldn't trust anyone more. I wouldn't trust anyone more than Al Ruddock to design my high intensity stuff, because that's basically why he's a doctor. He's been doing that for all of his life, so he understands truly what it takes to get athletes up on that point. So that's a great Instagram page to go follow. If you go there, say that we sent you, he'll love that. And it'll give him a little nod for the podcast appearances he's done with us. But that red zone area is really key to bring in quick adaptations. You can get adaptations happen within 6 sessions there.
I was stunned. I was stunned by how much difference they made once I started on them.
So start with 1 session a week, then progressively take it up to 2, and then 3 sessions a week is more than enough. All right. And then, you've got your aerobic training done, anaerobic training done, grey zone avoided until close to the event. So then the next question lies of how do I actually put that in a program? Because it's all good knowing this now. How do I put it into a program? So I've always been an advocate of using time as a variable rather than mileage. And the reason for that is if you go back to all of the considerations we had at the beginning, it allows you as a runner to be more flexible in your program. I have designed in my time some beautifully intricate programs down to working alongside nutritionists and physiologists of this is the time you train, this is why, this is the food that's going in, and I've spent days intricately working this out. But if it can't be adhered to by the runner, it is a pointless program, no matter how beautiful it is. So time as a variable rather than mileage in a week offers the runner a lot of flexibility. And
that, I'd have to say, that's another extremely important reason why a lot of sort of templated training plans are a problem. If you're like me, every time I was unable to do exactly the training session on that day, it's a stick to beat yourself with. It's a disappointment. It starts to weigh you down after a while.
Yeah. And ultimately, you're looking for consistency. So you want to be consistently doing these things up until the event. So the terminology for it is a macro and a micro cycle. Basically means long-term, short-term program, right? They just like to make interesting words to make them sound clever. A macro cycle might be something like a 6-week block of training that you've kind of looked at as, this is what my aim is for the next 6 weeks. Obviously, I want adaptations to become fitter. This is my test that I'm going to do at the beginning of the 6 week. And I would do multiple tests, just to make sure that you're testing a few things and book your date in there. A micro cycle is like what it looks like in a week or a day, So what you can do in a macro cycle is set your targets, but in a micro cycle in a week, you can say, I'm going to run for 4 hours in this week. And that could be 4 sessions, 2 sessions, 6 sessions, depending on where you fit. You might be doing 4 hours a week on average now, in which case you go, okay, I'm going to develop to 6 hours a week. And those 6 hours are all going to be in my green zone with 2 or bonus anaerobic sessions when I can get them in. All right, means that you can go out for a 30-minute, 40-minute run if you can sneak one in here. You can go out for a 2-hour one at the weekend, but as long as you get to that 4 to the 6 hour mark, you've made it. And it's important as well not to beat yourself up if you miss it by a few hours. It's like, that's my aim. When I was training for the Desert Ultra, it was, I'm going to aim for 6 hours a week. If I get more, great. But my minimum is 6 hours. There was a few weeks I did 5, but the week after I did 7. And that was enough to kind of get me back in shape.
Yeah.
And if you look at comparing to the rest of the market, a pretty consistent thing is 10 hours plus for the pros. If you dedicate 10 hours a week to you being in the aerobic zone consistently for a period of time, let's say 6 months to a year, you'll be pro level. You'll be up there in podiums. You'll be up there, because if everything has gone well, that is similar kind of timing to what others do. 4 hours is enough to do it if you're doing everything else, like watching your weight and things like that. General rule of thumb for me and all of my clients was to build to 6 and then add 10% on and take it up and down. So in your macro cycle, you know that you might be doing a polarized method where you've got 80% of your time, 20% of your time. Question comes up then is, how much time do I dedicate to my anaerobic time? Because you've just said that I might be sprinting for maximum 5 minutes. Because of the effort level, I always assign 30 minutes of time to a sprint session. So if you do a sprint session and it's only lasted 15 minutes of sprint time, you don't take the physical minutes you've been running. You assume that there's some knock-on effect to your recovery, so you just put that down as 30 minutes. So if you was aiming for 6-hour weeks and you did 3 HIIT sessions, there's an hour and a half of that as HIIT, and the rest of the time is made up of aerobic training. If you're walking a lot and hiking, I would also look at that as additional mileage on top of that. So maybe you'll try and get to your 6 hours in 5 days. And then if you go out if you know you're doing back-to-back walks that are specific to your event, and that's really in line with what you was doing, right?
Yeah.
6 hours plus of walking in the week when you had that bit of a niggle.
Yep.
And then you'd go out and put some walk running in at the weekend, which probably collectively put you to about 6 hours of running with walking on top.
Yeah, somewhere around there.
Less or more.
Yeah.
Okay. So you're using time as a variable. Your macro cycles are set. So 6 weeks, you're going to set testing protocol and gather your data in. Okay. You are going to make sure that your effort level is an 80-20 split of time, and you're not going to take it up more than 10% per week. They're the basics. All right. On top of that, we've got things like food, which again, we'll cover in a separate episode. We're also going to cover weight in a separate episode and the importance of that.
I mean, we've outlined the importance of having less of it, but we'll go in the nitty-gritty in another one.
And then when you come to your micro cycles, so you've got your 6 weeks there, you're now splitting it into 6 1 weeks. You can look at a few things like frequency of your training, or you can look at replicating the race time in total. Races are great now because they publish results, so you can see what race times are on average. You can kind of put yourself there and kind of set your thing of, all right, well, I'm going to do a long run this week, and I know that my race is probably going to be, let's say, for a 50k, you might be planning 6 hours. Well, it'd be nice if in training my long run could be 4 hours tops. I never think that you have to do the distance or time. Like if you're marathon training, you don't need to run a marathon in your training. Tops, no. I would say, is 30k or 3 hours. Or once again, you use your time. I'm aiming for a 5-hour marathon. I will run top end 3 hours. And then I know that I can probably muster another 2 hours on the event.
Yeah.
Chances are if you're running 3-hour long days at the weekend anyway, you'll be less than 5 hours is the nature of it.
Yeah.
So if we're looking at microcycles, we can look at the frequency of our session and things like session time then. So if you've got 6 hours to reach, your training will look a lot different if that's 3 2-hour runs or 6 1-hour runs.
Yeah.
There's a very specific thing that happens around running for about 1.5 hours on a cellular level with our bodies that is really useful for the longer stuff. So our body changes in the way that it works, and it draws on energy around about that 1.5 hour time. And that's why you shouldn't, and I'll say this with as much gravitas as possible, you don't need to pre-fuel for anything under 1.5 hours. Okay, your eating pattern should not shift from your regular pattern with any session under 1.5 hours. You don't need to pre-fuel for a 10k unless you're performing. I'll add that caveat. if you're performing, you might want to eat a little bit. But it doesn't mean that because you're running 10K tomorrow, even on a race, you should be wolfing down 20 million jacket potatoes.
I know we all want an excuse for a pizza, but you do not need to carb load for a 10K.
Yeah. Sorry to be the bearer of bad news here. But also, it's quite important not to overeat and overfuel on your runs and stuff like that. An hour and a half really is the time that your body starts to go, okay, I need to start drawing on different fuels. I'm starting to get tired now, and I'm going into this different zone. So that's quite important as well. And what I would say is if you're looking at performing fast, if it's a shorter version, if it's like 50K below, where it's going to be a relatively quick ultra in terms of pacing and stuff, because 50K is at the bottom end of the spectrum, frequency will work well for you. But if you're going towards the upper echelons of that and it's a 100K, 100-mile race, you are going to have to factor in some longer session times.
Yeah.
So you might have 10 hours built into your week. You might, rather than having 2-hour days back to back to back to back, where that might have some replication for a multi-day, I would suggest that you have 2 or 3 days worth of rest in there and then shove a big one in before, or either round those rest days where you're completely resting. And
that makes sense.
Yeah.
When I was doing my training, 5 hours a week was easy at first because I was commuting to work 5 days a week, but that was 5 single-hour blocks. As I started to get stronger and drop the weight, I started moving more of those hours into the weekend. So now maybe I'm only commuting once or twice in the week, but on a Saturday I'm going out and doing a proper route, a hike.
Yeah, and
enjoying it.
Your yomping pace was insane. I had to run to keep up with you in the end because you just...
Yeah, I got good at that.
Yeah. And I think it's really important to say that when I'm mentioning 6-hour training weeks, 10-hour training weeks, some people are like, I just haven't got the time to commit, so what's the point? Like, you can get results on 2 hours, 4 hours, and the thing is, you've got to keep that consistent base up. And I'm speaking from experience here. You'll only be annoyed at yourself if you do nothing for a period of time. Imagine it like a pyramid in terms of the shape. That bottom base is your base fitness. That's making sure you do your very basic stuff like your 10,000 steps a day, making sure that 90% of your diet isn't beer and ice cream, which sounds amazing.
Beer, ice cream.
Ice cream. But having that base set there, the next thing then, when you start to improve these level of fitness and adding things in, right now, my 10,000 steps and my food's on point. Now I'm going to start 4 to 6 hours a week of training. Once that's on point, we add the next layer of the pyramid, which is the HIIT sessions. Then we add the next layer, which is the tinier part, which is getting a coach involved and stuff like that. And then the final bit is like, probably for the pros only, is like you quit your job and you go for it and take supplements and all these kind of things. And there's a level of importance. Bottom base, maximum importance. Base gets smaller and the importance of it drops because you have to spend less time and less commitment on that. And it's pointless even thinking about supplements unless you've got a nutrient deficiency, or, the supplements aren't going to have the performance effect that consistency in your training plan will, and getting the 4-6 weeks in. So Dave Stash may argue with me on some points on that, but it should take what you won't disagree with is it should take less of an importance than your training. And everyone knows that guy or girl that's got all the kit, spends hours upon hours investing time in kit and the supplements and asking if they should do this and that, but just isn't putting the 4 to 6 hours in a week. So it's important to just say that start off, if you're really starting this, start off simple. Just get your 10,000 steps in a day, get moving more, get out there, get a backpack on. 10,000 steps a day with a backpack would be enough to get going with, and then start adding runs into that, build up, get up to your pyramid. Then all of a sudden you're winning the spine and setting course records.
Boom, just like that.
You're welcome.
And you can credit Kris on the line.
I think another thing on top of this as well is, I'll touch on it slightly, but it could be I don't think this is going to be a good podcast because it's quite a visual thing, but one of my particular areas that I focused on was injury prevention, in particular mobility and flexibility and all that kind of the prevention of injury rather than the recovery. So it was my job that runners didn't see physios, and hopefully put physios out of business.
Sorry, physios.
There'll always be a place because people won't listen. But the important thing is that you've got to be mobile. And when I say mobile, that's different than flexibility because it adds a strength element into there. So strength work is important in your training program. We'll touch on that in maybe the next episode. What I will say though is mobility sequences you can find on the internet and stuff. Yoga and things like that are great because you're moving and you're flowing rather than a static stretch. And it's a great thing to put in and around your HIIT session. I would never recommend to anyone to do 40 minutes of stretching. I do a bit of yoga. After about 30 minutes, I'm thinking, oh, God. I do yoga wrong anyway because I'm in there like, oh, come on. Gotta be the bendiest person in here.
Pushing that piano.
Yeah, completely ruining everyone's vibes in this yoga room. But what you can do is some mobility sequences in and around your HIIT session. So as a warm-up, as a cool-down, so you're doing 10 minutes here, 10 minutes there, and it's done. And bringing that into your training week is key. So think stupid little things like just trying to... the stretches that like trying to keep your hamstrings open, trying to James Dunn's actually quite good, Kinetic Rev, he's got it's Kinetic Revolution, he's got loads of stuff on YouTube. We are going to actually do our own at some point and do mobility sequencing, but don't just stretch aimlessly, do it with purpose throughout the week. You hear of Tom Evans, I listened to a podcast a while ago where he's like got a tennis ball by his bathroom sink. And when he's brushing his teeth, he's just running the tennis ball over his feet just to loosen them up and stuff before a run. And whatever you do, don't stretch after a run. Don't do that. Your muscles are warm. They're potentially tired and fatigued. You pushing them to the end ranges after a run is just asking for injury. I've seen 2 hamstrings snap.
Ugh.
After intense run, sat down, had a beer, got up and thought, I just need to stretch this out so I feel better tomorrow. They've moved.
Bang.
Hamstring just dink. What you're training for with, and we'll cover it again in the next session, but what you're training for with injury prevention and running is taking that inevitable wrong step, decking it, basically.
That's how you explain it to me. If you're going to get injured while you're running, especially if you're out, running off-road like we generally do, it's going to be an overstride. You've slipped, so your foot's not where it's supposed to be. You've avoided an obstacle, so your trailing foot is further behind than it's meant to be. And all of a sudden, you're split 20% wider than usual. Yeah,
you've rolled an ankle, you've slipped, you've done too much too soon. It isn't like a high-impact sport. Like, I used to deal with so many rugby players, mountain bikers, ice hockey players, where they've had impact, either fallen off the bike or clattered by someone else, and that means they've been posted in one direction and their body's shifted suddenly the other way. It's not like that in running. What it's going to be is either an inflammation, an overuse, a form issue that can be fixed with mobility movements and sequencing. Because the biggest cause of injury is not a lack of flexibility, it's an imbalance, being more flexible on one side than the other or stronger than the other. So you don't need to chase flexibility, you just need to be balanced and less rigid in certain areas. Now, rigidity actually, I probably should come out. Rigidity does actually help prevent injury because it helps prevent against, and when you're bracing against something. But that's me getting.
There's always
boring alert. Boring alert. So hopefully, just to recap everything there, you've got all the considerations at the beginning of the program. You should be looking about 4 to 6 hours a week, bare minimum, mainly aerobic with some anaerobic stuff in there. Stick green. Try and get into red, avoid grey until you're getting close to the time. Frequency of sessions important. It should replicate your race. The environments that you perform in and train in should replicate your race to some degree. Don't try, it doesn't have to for every session, just do what you can. Know that there's some limitations on travel. And be mobile. Don't just do loads of stretch sessions. To start with, go down to your local yoga class or get involved in some circuit classes at the gym so you're doing loads of different movements with some weight through it. Be consistent. Don't be fat. Try heart rate training out. Test regularly. Make sure your data collection's on point. When you write your program down, put it up somewhere fancy so you can look at it every morning and stick to it and stay motivated. If you've done all of that and you're not finding the motivation, get a coach.
There you go. I mean, do all of this and then maybe end up with a coach anyway. They're great to help you push forward.
Yeah.
But There you go. This sounds like that was useful.
Yeah.
I shouldn't sound surprised there, Kris.
I'm surprised in myself, actually. That was like a deep part of my brain that I've not used for a good 5 years.
Yeah, once we opened it. Boom.
But yeah, so hopefully that was enough to get you started with. If there's any questions,
you know where we are.
I'm not going to answer them unless you comment below on the specific thing that so if you listen to it on Spotify, you've got to leave me a review. That's the way I'm getting paid.
Yeah, iTunes reviews.
iTunes review if you're on iTunes. If you're on YouTube, drop it in the comment box. Hi again, YouTube. We'll wave to you.
Yeah, if you've watched this from the link on Twitter or Facebook, you can comment on those posts as well.
We'll
keep an eye out for the questions.
If you send me a message directly about the podcast episode asking me a question, I'm just going to refer you back to this episode.
Boom.
There you go.
Have that.
Now, this is where I should have dropped a mic and my grime.
Don't drop the mic. These are quite expensive and I'm pretty protective of them.
So I don't know where this is going to sit. Next episode in this coaching series, we'll probably talk about weight and food.
Yeah.
With a more general purpose for weight loss and things like that, and just how fueling massively affects your performance. Probably touch upon how important weight is in general in ultra running and the multi-day sphere. And then might not do a podcast on it, but might do a little video sequence of mobility movements you can do. My top 10. Yeah, maybe.
That'll be good.
And then if there's anything else that you want to know, any subjects you want to pick my brains on as a coach rather than an RD, put them in. Because we actually want this podcast, as well as having great guests, we want it to actually be useful.
Yeah.
Provide some insight.
And we will read the comments. We live this. We definitely will read the comments. And
we'll read the comments.
I'll read the comments and feedback to Kris.
Yeah. That made me sound... I don't care. I do.
I will not read the comments.
I will. And I'll get back to you. Cheers, Big Moose, as well.
Oh, yeah. Big Moose. Thank you very much.
Good effort to all you guys getting the coffee as well. Absolute banging effort. You're making people's lives better.
And again, we'll make sure, if you're wherever you're looking at this, look below it, and there'll be a link to Big Moose in there.
And if you're booked onto one of our races, get ready, because you're going to have a really good time. If you're not booked onto one of our races and you're thinking about it, go on.
Go on, then.
Dare you. Dares you. And we'll see you soon.
Yeah.
Ta-ra.